Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you to the Ludovika Festival here at the Ludovika University of Public Service. Today's panel, entitled Current Issues in the Middle East Conflicts, is directly aligned with our university's core themes of connectivity and Hungary's strategic interests in foreign policy. Over the next 45 minutes, we will explore key security challenges, historical perspectives, community engagement strategies, and emerging geopolitical trends in the Middle East with insights from our distinguished guests. Joining us today are esteemed experts who are bringing unique perspectives and profound insights into our discussion. First, we have Shalom Ben Hanan, a fellow at the International Institute Counterterrorism at Reichman University, who served for 27 years with the Israeli Security Agency, called in Hebrew Shabak, retiring at a senior leadership level equivalent to a major general. His expertise spans counterterrorism, intelligence, and Palestinian and international terrorism. Mr. Ben Hanan, thank you for joining us. Also with us is Dr. Kovács Tamás, Chair of the Department of Policy Theory and History at our university. Dr. Kovács possesses extensive knowledge in history, Holocaust studies, and archival research. He previously served as director of the Holocaust Memorial Center and has presented his work at various international forums across North America, Israel, Russia, and Europe. Thank you for joining us. We are also pleased to have Rabbi Megyeri Jonathán with us today. Rabbi Megyeri, educated extensively in the United States, has successfully bridged the traditional rabbinical teachings with contemporary marketing, media, and community engagement practices. His online presence has significantly impacted intercultural and interfaith dialogues, reaching diverse audiences globally. Thank you for joining us. Finally, but not least, we welcome Yissachar, Vice President of Research and Content at the Israel Defense and Security Forum, called Habithonistim, maybe? Yeah, or deep expertise in Israel national security and Middle Eastern affairs is complemented by his multilingual capabilities and experience in digital and international media strategy. And allow me to briefly introduce myself as well. My name is Márk Joszipovics Fodor. I am a second-year doctoral student here at the Ludovika University of Public Service at the Doctoral School of Military Sciences. My research focuses on the way in which the Israeli society influences the state's security and defense policies. Additionally, I serve as the director of the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association Foundation of Hungary. Let's begin our discussion. First, I would turn to Mr. Shalom Ben Hanan, and considering your extensive counterterrorism background, could you begin by describing the current operational and intelligence situation in Gaza? What are the key security challenges and ongoing priorities for Israel in this context?
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation for this festival. It's a privilege to be here and to share with you our experience of an ongoing war since the 7th of October, about a year and a half, and it's still going to who knows when. The key points in our challenges now in Gaza Strip is that Israel is in a battle, first of all, in 7 fronts at the same time, and of course the main front that it still is an ongoing front is the front in Gaza Strip. I think it's an unprecedented campaign with a lot of complexities, military complexities, intelligence complexities, and others. And the first one, of course, is the need to employ, to conduct an urban complex warfare in a very small area with 2 million civilians and with a terrorist organization, a very radical terrorist organization, or a guerrilla organization that uses the population as a human shield. So to fight a war in an area like that would be very complex. The second challenge, of course, is the goals that we set One of them is to break, of course, the military capabilities, to eliminate the military capabilities of this guerrilla organization, but not only military capabilities, also governance capabilities, because for us, after the 7th of October, to go back to the situation of the 6th of October, that a sub-state organization is parking on our borders, it's impossible for us. At the same time, maybe these governance capabilities are even more important than the military capabilities. How so? These governance capabilities allow Hamas, still during the war, to preserve a part of its military capabilities, a major part of their governance of the population, using also the humanitarian aid, taking sometimes this humanitarian aid as a hostage also. Like all the population are hostages in Gaza, not only the Israeli hostages. And to use that, sometimes even to sell it in very high prices in the black market in Gaza and earn money to rebuild again capabilities and to fight against the IDF. And of course, on top of that, the third challenge is the challenge to fight when you have at the same time still 59 hostages, dead and alive. We started the war with 250. Now, still 59 hostages are in captivity in terrible conditions, of course, and the clock is ticking, and there is a pressure on the leadership and on the army and on the Shin Bet to release them as fast as we can. The problem is that we are dealing with a very vicious and cruel organization that uses them also as a human shield and, of course, as a security policy, because we are not reaching a deal to release the other hostages, and we shall have to see how to do it with these problems that have been mentioned.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kovács, turning to the historical and policy aspects, what precedents or international experience might inform the future administrative arrangements for Gaza? What lessons can be drawn from the past?
Firstly, I would like to thank the invitation, and I would like to congratulate the organizers for this vaccinated festival. It's a very good question, and I came to my mind what the chief rabbi in Vienna said in 1938 when the German troops occupied Austria and Vienna. The situation is bad, but it's harmless. So I think, firstly, let's clarify what is Gaza. If you watch TV or hearing radio, Gaza is a city, but we spoke about Gaza Strip, which is the area. This area was part of the Ottoman Empire and later the British Mandate territory, and exactly it wasn't owner of this territory in the history after World War II, because Egypt occupied after 48 this part of the part of Palestine. But later, Israel occupied this territory, and 20 years ago, Israeli troops left this territory. And I think the Israeli leadership believed the Palestinian leaders could make a good government for them exactly. And unfortunately, Hamas came to the power exactly almost 20 years ago. And I have to say, I think today this is the land of the terrorism in Gaza. So think it over, the tunnel system, which is under the Gaza, So you can see lots of hospital or school, high school. There is a university, Gaza University. It's beautiful, it's fantastic. But under the line, there is a very, very complicated tunnel system. My question, who made this tunnel system and who financed this tunnel system? I think this is the main question, because exactly it was a kind of financing of the terrorism. And unfortunately, Hamas is a terrorist group, is a terrorist system, and exactly this was the base of Hamas, and this was the base to follow the threat against Israel, territory of Israel. So I am very pessimistic. I think we can see at the moment two wars. One is the classical war, so IDF Sahel fight against the terrorists. But the other hand, the war in the media. I think this is very important of this history, and we can see the Western European countries, especially the US universities, Western European universities, especially, for example, the Netherlands Foreign Ministry, exactly support, I changed my words, they didn't and haven't support the Israeli action, the Tzahal, and unfortunately they support the pro-Palestinian groups in this world. I think this is the one of the main points. And yes, we should learn. We should learn Hamas is a terrorist organization, a terrorist group. If we talk to the Hamas like we talk to the Nazi party, almost like that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kovács. Rabbi Megyeri, I would like to ask you about the emotional and societal toll within Israel. How resilient do you find the Israeli society to be since October 7th? Are we beginning to see signs of some kind of societal fatigue? And what role can spiritual or communal leadership play in sustaining morale during prolonged conflicts like this?
How much time do I have? So first of all, again, thank you everybody for this kind invitation, and I'm very happy to see so many faces that take interest, or who take interest in such an important conflict that takes place some 2,000 kilometers away from our homeland. Nevertheless, it is something that has an effect on not just the region, not just in the state of Israel, but also on the region, and it has an effect on Europe and the world entire. So the societal, and I've been fortunate enough to visit Israel every month since this war of the Jewish state against terrorism has begun, and there's a number of issues that have to be addressed, and the number of issues that the Israeli society faces ever since this war began. And as Professor Kovács and Mr. Ben Hanan also said, a lot of things have changed since October 7th of 2023, and one of the main changes is that the dream, so to say, that some people have cherished, and many people, such as myself, have not. But some people have cherished the dream of any kind of two-state solution is dead. In the eyes of the Israeli society, there's almost a wall-to-wall coalition within political powers and within the society as such that there will not be a Palestinian state in the foreseeable future, simply for the fact that after the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip in some 18 years ago, the Palestinians were given a chance to make a Palestinian state, albeit in a very small area, but it could have been a nice trial for later solutions, and they have failed and failed miserably. Everybody could see the result of what is happening, and there's no reason to believe that if there would be a larger Palestinian state governed by even a different type of group of Palestinians, the result would be any different. That being said, there are a number of issues that put pressure on the Israeli society and that keep the politicians awake at night. The main dilemma is the lives of the hostages, of whom there are 59, some 21 to 24 still believed to be alive. But since we're talking about the state of Israel, the dead bodies also matter, and we cherish it, and we hold that very important. We usually extend a very large price to bring back dead bodies also. So you got the situation of the hostages, and then on the other hand, you got the goal of winning over a terrorist organization of Hamas and to destroy them and not to ever let any terrorist organization to take power in the neighborhood right next to Israel. And sometimes these two war goals are perhaps mutually exclusive is not the right word, but it is definitely something that is very hard to achieve. We're talking, as Professor Ben Hanan said, we're talking about a small area, an urban warfare, which is, some of you guys are soldiers here and work in security establishments. You know that urban warfare is a special kind of warfare. As Professor Spencer said, who's the greatest expert in the world of urban warfare, said is a very difficult task to achieve in such a small area with so many civilians. On the other hand, so you got the hostage situation. There is no Israeli family who is not in one way or another affected by this war or affected by what happened on October 7th. And there's not one family in Israel, including my own family. I don't live in Israel, but I have family in Israel. Thank God I have a lot of family in Israel, and who don't have soldiers who fight in Gaza or in Lebanon, or who have fought in Gaza, who have, God forbid, fell in Gaza or in Lebanon. So you got that situation also. Israel has just activated a number of reserves. The entire society is in war, basically, and that takes a very heavy toll on the morale and on society in general. So you got the hostages, you got the goal of winning over Hamas, which again sometimes conflict each other. You got the situation where Israel has lost some 900 soldiers already since the beginning of the war, which is a very heavy price that Israel has never paid in wars before. And again, we're talking about young guys, beautiful boys and girls, and everybody wants this war to be over. Then you got another issue, which is a unique issue in the Israeli society, and that is the very religious Jews, the drafting of Orthodox Jews into the army, which is a very serious question, societal question in the state of Israel, which has to be dealt with. But one thing is for sure, and I just named 4 of the key issues that this society faces, the dilemma that politicians and decision makers have to face when conducting any sort of operation. But the answer to your question with this broad introduction is that what we see in Israel since October 7th is, if you could describe it with one word, that is resilience. The resilience of the Jewish people, resilience of the Israeli people. By the way, not only Jews and Israeli Arabs and Druze and Israeli Christians, resilience of not letting a monstrous, degenerate, medieval sort of terrorist organization to win over the hearts and minds of people who want to live in peace and want to raise families in peace. And there is a wonderful, I've talked about a lot of bad stuff, but there's a wonderful awakening of spirituality in Israel today. More and more people find their way back to their Jewish roots, their biblical roots, their religious roots, which is also, again, very nice and heartwarming. So there is some hope, and there is always hope. I would not be as pessimistic as Professor Kovács. As a matter of fact, I'm 1,000% optimistic that that Israel will prevail, and the forces of evil will be put down with the unity and with the resilience of the Israeli society, and with the help of wonderful countries such as our own here in Hungary.
Thank you, Rabbi Megyeri. Now, turning to Mr. Or Yissachar, let's explore a broader strategic arc. How do you assess the current state of Iran's influence in the region, especially in the context of its nuclear ambitions and the proxy networks? What impact do you believe the shifting dynamics of US policy, especially during this Trump administration, had on Israel's security doctrine and regional deterrence posture?
All right, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you guys for being here. It's always wonderful to be back in Budapest. It's an outstanding festival. And for an Israeli, it's always a pleasure to see a lot of young faces with uniform coming from Israel. This morning, I can tell you that traveling around Israel, seeing people walking around with uniform, especially the reserve forces, as you know, people who finish their duty, but then they are called to serve in the reserve army, that is really the national security asset of Israel, and heavily reliant on the reserve forces, touches upon every family, as was said. And I think at the aftermath of October 7, Israel learned, I believe, what the United States learned after 9/11, which is if you believe that appeasement will prevent war, on the contrary, appeasement invites aggression. And what happened was that in the Gaza Strip, in the morning of October 7, when we all woke up and ran to the shelters, the Hamas Iranian proxy in Gaza was piling up explosive barrels. It's like one officer told me. Imagine you had a neighbor piling up barrels of explosives right on your fence, and you would ignore or appease, sort of offering them something in return, maybe money, maybe work, and then all these barrels will sort of slide down to your backyard. That's exactly what happened. The main lesson, I believe, is not to let the threat metastasize, not to let it grow to the extent that it's now no longer controllable. Look what happened. As if, imagine how the extent of it. 1,200 people killed. That would be 1 in every 10,000 Israelis who was killed. Every family was touched. Nothing like that. This was, makes it the deadliest terrorist attack in history, more than 9/11. And so, what you mentioned about Iran makes it a flashpoint in the entire Iranian effort to destabilize the Middle East, and in turn carry ripple effects across the globe, all the way to Europe. Iranian spies and terrorist cells acting around Europe, attempting to assassinate the former Vice President Mike Pence, and arrested all over the place, in Denmark, in France, using minorities sometimes, and sometimes others to infiltrate and attempted to carry out terrorist attacks, sometimes successfully. So Iran's effort as a country is a multi-pronged effort, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also in Lebanon and in Yemen. As you can hear, we all ran to the shelters a few days ago as well. In parallel to the Houthi Iranian proxy firing at Israel, they did not only fire at Israel, they also fired at the US Navy over 140 times. So that would make it now an American problem, and a European and Western problem, and not just an Israeli problem, probably not strategic on their part. And above all, the Iranian nuclear program. And I think the Trump administration is now facing, and generally the West, is facing the biggest challenge of us all, because we are now facing a historically, potentially missed opportunity to finish off the Iranian nuclear project once and for all. This is the main effort to make the Middle East a sort of hegemonic sphere. Imagine the USSR back in the day, and you guys know it very well. The Iranians want to do the same thing in the Middle East, to make it all an Iranian hegemony sphere of influence. A nuclear country, a country equipped with a nuclear weapon, can do that. Currently, they cannot. What happened in the past year and a half, since the war began, is that they lost practically all of their proxies to the level where they're almost irrelevant. If left unchecked, that would be dangerous. But Hamas, Hezbollah, and others are not what they used to be. And so it feels vulnerable. And so it could arrived to the same conclusion as it arrived after Ukraine happened and after Libyan dictator was ousted. So a country that gives up on its nuclear ambitions is prone to risking its regime. That's the #1 challenge in the Middle East right now, to face the Iranian nuclear program head on, with the understanding that Iran endangers not only Israel, we can deal with them, but Europe and the United States and the West as a whole. So for Israel, it's existential, not transactional, right? It cannot be compromised in another botched deal like the JCPOA of 2015. And the Iranians cannot sort of keep the gun on the table and say, okay, we just put a few centrifuges in the basement, like happened in 2015, and we'll just reinstall them whenever we please. This is a serious threat to Europe as well, with ICBMs reaching all the way to Eastern Europe and covering vast sphere. And if I may finish with the last dimension of it, because it's a multi-dimensional war in Gaza, in Lebanon, and so on, but it's also a war of information, and it's a war on the digital and disinformation. And if you listen to the Iranian leader who said, basically, and I learned Farsi, listen to the original language, it's beautiful, and I'm really sorry that it's been abused this way by its leaders, said that he praised students in Western campuses waving Palestinian and Hamas and Hezbollah flags and wearing kafiyas and chanting from the river to the sea without knowing what river and what sea they discuss, and saying, you are now a resistance front. Think about it. You are now a resistance front. Now, hang on. We didn't sign up for that, didn't we? The Iranian leader is now praising us for sort of participating in the Iranian campaign. So they know, they understand what the USSR understood, which is in order to topple the West, you cannot do that militarily. So you hammer away the fault lines and you try to make domestic division and sow uncertainty and make them believe that somehow what's going on in Gaza is genocide, even though there's no evidence for that. There is always civilian collateral damage, much less in Gaza than Afghanistan, Iraq, or any other war. And they make them believe all sorts of things, many debunked videos going around TikTok. And I think ultimately, I would like to say I'm optimistic about the next steps because, well, I'm probably lying to you. I don't know if I should be optimistic, but let's say I'm optimistic for that, for the case, just for the sake of argument. Because in the next few weeks and in the next few months, the fate of the Middle East and indeed the West will be determined. Whether we are going to finish off the threat and remove the threat and thereby end the war, or we're going to simply let Iran, Russia, and China take over the Western hegemony in the world. Because the Iranian case study will influence what's going on with Russia and China and the way they're treating the West. Ultimately, Israel cannot be expected to accept the unacceptable. And this is the point where we're facing right now. It's a critical junction that will be tested in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yissachar. And before we conclude, we have time for 1 or 2 very short questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and state who would you like to ask about what. Okay, and so is there any question? If not, then
there are military people. They only ask questions if they have to. So
yeah, I would like to have one last question for our panelists. Please, short answers. So, what would you advise for young students here at the university, especially that, as you mentioned, they will be military and police officers or senior governmental officers in a Hungarian state? How to prepare to serve their country as much as, for example, the young people in Israel do? What would your best advice to prepare for the challenges ahead of them?
Train hard, first of all. I suggest that civilians and military soldiers, and my son was recruited to the army 1 month ago, okay, so I'm very happy to see these young cadets. But my son was recruited to a war, okay? And we hope that our children will go to the army and that we will be clever enough to prevent wars so they will not have to fight. But this hope that sometime, maybe, we will end wars, sometimes, I don't know when, okay? But that doesn't mean that you must cooperate or accept any radical phenomena or ideologies to live by your side. Because if you do it, eventually you'll go into a war, and it will be a war in their conditions, in their terms, the terms of the radicals. I call it, it's like Nazi Germany, like the professor said, okay? I call it the sometimes pathetic try to ride on the back of the tiger, okay? To feed him, literally, to give him money, maybe for civilian needs that will go eventually for arms and weapons and other things, not civilian, and eventually, at the end of the line, a radical ideology will explode towards a democratic state. Peace can be only between states, and I would prefer it to be a democratic state because it will not hold. It will not hold. And the victory in this war must be the understanding of all democratic states that you cannot ride at the back of the tiger in any radical ideology. It can be an Islamic radical ideology, it can be a fascist or a Nazi or a communist, never mind. And there is no peaceful situation with a terrorist organization. And the people who are going to the army must prepare themselves to the state of war, must understand the intelligence and the ideologies that are behind the scenes of these organizations or enemy countries. And good luck.
So if I may humbly offer an advice, I was asked to give one, is that national security, for me, only derives from national ethos. You can only have national security if you have belief in the righteousness of your cause. We often say in the IDF that we have what you need in addition to the sword is the spark, okay, in your eyes. The question, what am I doing this for, as opposed to how do I do that, all right? The how and the why are sometimes very different questions. And the why is probably the most important one. My nephew joined the military last month, the Navy. Told him that's all right. It's not intelligence, but you'll do all right. No, I'm kidding. He'll do amazingly well. And I think each one in their fields will ask themselves, how do I make this country better? How do I keep my family safe? How do I keep my community safe? And most of all, not to allow threats to metastasize. Otherwise, as we learned the hard way, they explode in your face. Sometimes to prevent threats doesn't start a war like they teach us. Many times it prevents war. And if I had to say one thing is that very often, that's the soldier part, the student part in this university, is that when I look in campuses, it never happened in Hungary, thankfully, but when I look at campuses in Western Europe and in the United States and elsewhere and around the world, and I see Jewish students being blocked and not being allowed in campus, not Israeli students, not, IDF generals, simply Jewish students who are being blocked by protesters, I think we should all be ashamed by that. I think we should all say clearly and unequivocally that this is not okay, and we do not approve of that. And this is far from a policy prescription. This is already reminiscent of what happened back in the day of 80 years ago. And so I strongly believe that if you have conviction, if you have the why, you will find the how. And this is a lesson that you learn in Israel. Even if you don't have that kind of a threat map as Israel has, still every country, in order to preserve its sovereignty, needs to ask itself this question and then come up with the right answer.
My answer is very short. First, read books. Second, check the so-called facts. Third, don't believe ChatGPT 100%. Fourth, listen to the clever rabbis.
Well, thank you. I'll also promise to be very short, and I agree with all what has been said previously. I would not be. It is very hard for me not to quote the Bible when it comes to questions like this, and the answer in the Bible is very short. We read this in the 5 books of Moses. We read this later on in the book of Joshua. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. We should be strong, and strengthen others. Nobody's alone. You're not alone. Nobody's alone. You should be. You should look out for your fellow. You should look out for your friend, your mates, your companions. You should look out for your family, and also keep an eye on heaven, because everything is up to God. We're only servants of God in this fight for good.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was a great ending. So as our time draws to close, I want to sincerely thank our panelists, Shalom Ben Hanan, Professor Kovács Tamás, Rabbi Megyeri Jonathán, and or Yissachar for sharing their valuable insights. Today's discussion has significantly enhanced our understanding of the complex dynamics in the Middle Eastern conflicts, highlighting themes of connectivity, strategic policy, community engagement, and security, the core topics central to the Ludovika Festival's mission. Thank you all very much for your engagement and attention. Enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.